Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Senate Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife. And it's good to see everybody this morning. I had to pull on the rope 3 times to get my motor started, but I don't know about you guys. Mr. Chairman, come on forward. We're going to take up House Bill 5 this morning. Fishing Outfitters and Guides, registration of fishing boats. This is a bill that came all the way through the interim and all the way through the other chamber. Shepherded through by the good chairman. So Chairman, tell us about House Bill 5 this morning. I think we will dispense with roll call this morning, Sue, because we have 2 members presenting bills other places and we can count to 3. So I think we're good to go. So
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Morning,
Chairman. I
Representative.
just had a gaze over there to make sure I didn't go out of turn here. Well, thank you for having me again. This is a House Bill 5 that has been worked now. We were just reflecting on it outside in the hallway for 2 different interim sessions and far beyond that, years ago. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. I'm no longer an outfitter, but I do want to acknowledge that, in reflecting on what this does and what it doesn't do or where this has come from. I mean, in 2015, there's a group of outfitters, I think it's important for this committee to know, and also those online, that independently met in Thermopolis. And we met, and there's a number of outfitters all invited, across the state, and said, how can we self-regulate? This is something that we need to do. This is 9 years ago now. This is becoming overcrowded. These sections of water are, being overrun. And, we had a lot of momentum. Season started, momentum fizzled. Went away, and then this topic has come up numerous times out of the Sublette County area, obviously the Natrona, Casper area, and certainly a lot in Hot Springs County. So it kind of brings us to where we are now. We've had a lot of different bills that have been drafted and sat in kind of the queue, if you will, the last 2 sessions, and certainly attempts by the former speaker and different ideas that came down the line through that process. Some widespread and very, very large bills, I would say, and then this is kind of a narrowly focused bill is where we've landed. So, Mr. Chairman, we did have the opportunity as a TRW committee to go tour your neck of the woods, and we met. I think the good Senator Schuler was with us, and we met and went out and spent a morning at the reef and talked to the local law enforcement and the BLM and talked about the impact, especially in the springtime, that you guys see in that area. During that trip, I had the opportunity to run down to the mile, hour away, and go see what it was like. That day I was on the mile. It was an August day. There's only 12 boats, but 11 of them were out of state. I was with a local guide in Casper and had a great day, but kind of got to reflect with him what is the impact. And really those impacts are seen mostly in the springtime. And that's not unique to the Casper area. That's also unique to Thermopolis. It's also unique to Sublette County. As water starts to drop and get warmer, guides start to disperse and kind of go on their way. A unique aspect to this proposed legislation I'll go through here in just a moment, Mr. Chairman, is it really encompasses 4 or 5 counties. The ones I've mentioned in communities, but we'll add Lincoln County into that, which happens to be in my district, where the Salt River is what I call a free-for-all. It's the Wild West. And they are seeing, I started guiding there in the early 2000s, and you'd be lucky to see another boat. It was beautiful, per day. Now you get to these 2 or 3 parking lot boat ramps, and there's 4, 5, 6, 7 cars parked with trailers, mostly commercial guiding in that neck of the woods. So I really think we need to concentrate on the communities we're affecting, which is Lincoln County, Sublette County, the greater Casper area, and certainly sneaking down to Rawlins now, some Saratoga, and then also Hot Springs County, which is seeing just a massive amount of drift boat users, commercial and private. So quickly going over House Bill 5, it was amended pretty heavily on the other side, on the House side, but it does a few unique things. The one thing it requires our great Game and Fish to do is establish kind of a monitoring system, a boat sticker system, so we can begin to get our head wrapped around how many fishing guides are in Wyoming operating in their drift boats. And that can be found on page 3, lines 15 through 17. What was added on the other side after coming out of the interim pretty clean was this advisory board concept. The advisory board concept can be found on page 2, lines 18 on. And the advisory board, the idea behind it was, there's some fears in certain communities of, if we just hand this over to our wonderful Game and Fish, what comes of it, or what doesn't come of it? As you'll highlight, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of mays in here, and I know we often in both bodies talk about mays and shalls, but and I would certainly reflect if Mr. Senator Schuler remembers, but we purposely kept this as mays. This is some pretty uncharted territory, if you will, in the fishing world, in the boat world, and we want it to be mays because we still we need to learn more before we can really narrow it down. So what the bill does is creates this advisory board appointed by each of the 7 members of the commission statewide, and required to have 2 specific drift boat operators in that advisory board to kind of help lead this conversation moving forward. Involved in that, you do have what I said on page 3, which requires that the registration and payment of annual fee for that commercially guided boat, which we are, there's a shall in there on the last line of page 15. Important because we want to kind of get our head wrapped around how many guiding operators there are. And that is really the gut of the bill. We do have, what was amended in was some discussion on how we can give a nod or acknowledge our in-state folks that are here, own their house, employing Wyoming guides, filling up at Wyoming gas stations, and ultimately it came out of the other body with that, and you can notice that on a couple different places in the bill, but preference given to Wyoming companies, preference given to Wyoming outfitters, but ultimately I think the commission will have some thoughts on that. And that was new to us as it got amended on the other side. That was an amendment that was brought that was not out of the interim. And yeah, there's like I said, there's a lot of mays, and it allows the commission to begin to move forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will certainly acknowledge that when this concept first came up in a big room during the interim, and everyone looked around and said, where does this land? And I didn't think I'd get so many evil stares, that laser eyes looking at me. And this was kind of something I had shepherded for a while, and certainly there continues to be conversation. Does this land in the outfitters and guide boards world? The rumors have it, it almost existed there in the 70s. The last second they stripped fishing out of that, and since then it has been literally the Wild West. I equate it to, as I grew up fishing and guiding, you can meet a guy at a bar, you can give him $500 and he'd take you on the river the next day. No insurance, no knowledge, no safety, and we're still there today. Now there are places in the state, jurisdictionally, some of the BLM lands, some of the Forest Service lands, some of the county lands, and state parks that have made an attempt to kind of get an idea and have a permitting system, but generally it's still pretty Western out there. And I do want to acknowledge that nobody in that room wanted to take on this concept, and it's always hard to ask of a department, especially one that's near and dear to my heart, to expend resources and time and effort on something that is not necessarily in their wheelhouse. But working with the Outfitters and Guide Board, ultimately it's where it has landed, and I think they'll have some thoughts on it. But with that, I will stand for questions.
Well, Chairman, I commend all the work you've done to get it this far. It was interesting to read through the bill this weekend, the advisory board concept and all that. I'm anxious to hear from the department on that. But yeah, a lot of reflection that I had growing up, on the Platte River, and then moving over and growing up on the Green River. And I was one of the first ones to guide a fishing boat down from Warren Bridge. Those were great days back then. Nobody knew about it, and we made a mistake and went into the bar and told somebody, and we're here today, aren't we? So it's really changed, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah. It has changed tremendously, during COVID, and I was going to pull the stat this morning or this weekend, and I didn't, but, I remember hearing in a meeting that year over year, fishing license sales nationwide went up 100% a year for those 2-3 years of intense COVID, 100% per year on average. And I think it's such a special thing for our country, for our state to get out, enjoy these waters. And it's unique to the data. Some of the science does not support this, and I acknowledge that. Some of the data The fish counts are great. We are so lucky to have a department that can sustain the fisheries we have, and anglers that care for their catch and release it, and are aware of the whole the process compared to where it maybe used to be, back in the day. And I think it's great we still have anglers that get to bring that fish home and feed their family. But we really have, we've come a long way as an industry. And I think you're right. I think if you wouldn't have walked into the bar, that still might be a secret over there in Sublette County. I spent the majority of my guide life on the Green River putting in at Warren Bridge.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of days floating and watching out for thunderstorms, but still, Sublette County is certainly where a lot of this has began with former senators and representatives, and that just kind of got the conversation going. I was confronted this weekend about this bill and talking to the department. Uniquely, my neck of the woods, although partially in Lincoln County, where it's a free-for-all, there's not a spot in Teton County you can legally meet someone and go guide a fishing trip without a permit. I mean, it is a fully regulated industry in Teton County, from Yellowstone National Park through Grand Teton National Park, through our county land, which is a town section we call Wilson South Park, all the way into the Bridger Teton National Forest Service. You are required to have a permit, which make sure you have knowledge, insurance, CPR, first aid, and I think it does a great job of regulating the experience up there. But we still deal with crowding up there with these restrictions. There's still boat ramps that have 10, 12, 25 boats kind of queued up to get going, but nothing like we were hearing on the Platte. Those that trip, the field trip we took, the former TRW interim committee, hearing these stories, 100 boats lined up, especially in the spring. And I've been one of those 100 boats in Thermopolis. So with that, I'm certainly happy to stick around and stand for questions from the good committee, or we can hand it off to the good department.
Go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on this, the commercially guided fishing boats advisory board. What do you hope to come out of that? What are you looking for?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, that was one of the amendments that came in from the House side, and it kind of originated out of Casper. I think it almost gets us back to where we were during the interim when we all worked it very hard. But ultimately, I think that advisory board is going to have the opportunity to really define how this looks in the future. We use this specific statute and use the different commissioner districts for some of items like this. Certainly, I rely on our commissioner in my neck of the woods for advice, and I think that's how the system is set up. Certainly for the department, to have them picking folks, I think is unique. We toyed with the idea of making it an appointed board by the chief executive. Ultimately, kind of deciding that let's keep it more in the hands of the folks that are boots on the ground in each community. And then late we added in that idea that we do have to have a couple of operators on that advisory board. So just trying to have a broad enough stroke here where we can get the best information, and then that advisory board can potentially take something like this piece of legislation and get back to us and tweak it as appropriate.
Any other questions? Chairman, I've got one that all the way through this, I've been concerned about the enforcement piece. Having been on the river, your entire life, what do you think about that? Is it enforceable, what we're trying to do here?
Mr. Chairman, I think that is, that's what we're all wondering. Without going too deep into the big game world, they have Outfitters and Guides board that certainly cannot enforce jurisdictional assignments or operating areas. So it's a misconception that the Outfitters and Guide board says, Chairman Landon, you can go hunt in the Shirley Basin, or Chairman Landon, you can go hunt in the Bridger Teton. They cannot do that. They regulate the professionalism of it, and it's very hard to check some of those boxes to become an outfitter and guide. But with that, a lot of that regulation on that side is done by our department and also by the folks out on the ground. So to me, the game and fish and the folks that are out doing it, and certainly our wardens, the idea of the sticker behind this bill is they're here, they're checking our licenses anyway. They're checking AIS. And yeah, we received some pushback on, do we really need another sticker on my boat? Well, to preserve the resource, I certainly don't have a problem with it. As a guide, I used to look like my boat looked like a, polka dotted boat, because when I was in Idaho, I had certain stickers. When I was on the green, I had certain stickers. When I was in the county, I had certain
Kind of like
stickers.
NASCAR, huh?
Yeah, a little bit like that, but you're just not getting paid the big sponsorship bucks. So yeah, I think that that's really where we looked at where it can land in that, and the idea being, at least in my brain, is they're already there to check our clients or our own license. If you and I are out enjoying a day, and they can just glance over and see whatever that sticker might look like, and okay, he's a guide, he has a sticker, he's good. Or man, that really looks like these folks are, maybe up from a neighboring state, or they're teaching someone how to cast and they don't have a sticker, so I'm gonna go have that conversation. And those, I acknowledge, are hard conversation to have. And I will tell you, in the National Park Service, when I've been up there before on a for fun trip, those park rangers will separate you. And they'll come question individually. How do you know Chairman Landon? Oh, well, we met at the Cowboy Bar, and he gave me a couple $100 and I taught him how to fish.
That's where you find.
I'm still trying to teach him how to fish. He hasn't quite figured it out yet. No, but in all seriousness, I think that is tough, because the enforcement side, without that, we have nothing.
Yeah.
And it is asking. It is a big ask of our department, and it is a big ask of our wardens to be boots on the ground. But those interactions, for my almost 20 years of guiding, were always so positive. Here's my license. How'd you guys do today? Do you have any fish in your cooler? And I think just having, while I acknowledge it is adding more to their plate and another potential statute to the book, having that sticker on that boat or that trailer is a good start to just kind of say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the requirements we need to get there. And this is just up in the game of professionalism and protecting the folks in Wyoming.
Good thoughts. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, we'll let you sit back. We want to get the department up here and visit with them, and appreciate your work, Chairman. Thank you. Good morning. Game and Fish Department. It's good to see you guys.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Director.
Senators. Angie Bruce, Director of Game and Fish, and here with me today is our fisheries expert, the Chief of Fisheries, Alan Osterland. So I'll have a few thoughts, and then I'll turn it over to the chief, and then maybe wrap up after him as well. Just first of all, want to thank the sponsor and Senator Schuler, Senator Jones, all those who have worked on this as an interim topic over the last 2 years. I think we did it interim for 2 years. So definitely been talked about a lot, and just appreciate all the work on that. When I visit with other states, the game and fish agencies, they all give me one piece of advice is do it sooner than later, get ahead of the issue. And I think that's a valuable message. And we've been trying. Exactly how it looks and how we operate is really the question here. But the need is starting to be more and more evident, I think. And so I'll turn over to Chief Osterland to give you a little bit more framing up the issue, and then I do have a proposed amendment just to address a concern from our AG's office that I want to run by you.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, Director. And Chief, good morning. Nice to see you here.
Good morning.
I like talking fisheries.
That's good. I do too. Good morning, Chairman Landon, committee members. I'm Alan Osterland, Chief of Fisheries. Appreciate the time. I think that Representative Byron did a great job on laying the foundation where we're at. And it has been a topic of concern for quite a few years now. Since I've been in the job, just about every year it comes up. It's been several interim sessions. So there's a lot of background there. Since it has been on everybody's radar for a while, the department has been gathering some baseline information on looking at how much boat use on different stretches of river, and Representative Byron listed those. The big ones that we see are the Platte River, Green River, New Fork, Salt, and the Bighorn. The Snake River, it has a program already, and it works really well. There are some agencies that do have some kind of permitting system like the BLM. The Fish and Wildlife Service on the refuge has a good program there. Forest Service requires some permitting. Well, what we found is that, in conjunction with our annual fisheries surveys, our fisheries are in good shape. thankfully. And so we don't really see it as a resource issue. Now, we took another step and we did a hooking injury survey. Started out there on the Platte River on Gray Reef, and we expanded it throughout the state now. One of the areas that we do see quite a bit of the extreme hooking injury is the Gray Reef area of the North Platte. So that those fish are being caught multiple times. And that could be reflective of the type of gear that's being used. So the department does have tools to regulate some of that, like the pressure that has been seen on the redds or the nests where people are fishing over. We can put in restrictions to protect those areas, which we're proposing right now. We're proposing some regulations on type of gear, like having barbless hooks. Right now, we're doing that. So the department's doing what we can to protect the resource. But what it boils down to, in my mind, is that it's the experience issue, and especially, certain times of year, as the representative indicated, May and June, in some areas, especially tailwater areas, are really busy. As the water clears up in one area, like say over in the Green River and New Fork, more people come in there. When the salt clears up first, people shift over there. So, there are areas that get impacted by the number of people that are floating during certain times of the year. And that depends on how that water clears up or how the fishing is too. People shift around. Some of the information that we've gathered show that some of the highest use number boat per day is on the Gray Reef and that lower Platte there. Bighorn River and Thermopolis is getting a lot of impact. And then at certain times of the year, like I mentioned, the New Fork and the Green River, where people are transitioning there as the water clears up there first. So I guess I'll wrap up just saying that, we've got some baseline information. We're trying to do our best to protect the resource with the tools that we have. And I think that we do have the adequate regulatory tools to implement the regulations to protect the resource. So it continues to be at the levels they are right now. Some of the things are out of our control. Mother Nature dictates water flows. And so reproduction sometimes isn't as good at 1 year or versus the next, but we're always adjusting. We try to manage on a wild fisheries basis, but if we need to supplement with hatchery raised fish, that's what we do. And so with that, I'll close and take any questions, or if the director has anything she might want to add to supplement what I said.
Chief, thank you very much. Senator Schuler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know when we started working this bill, we were gearing it towards our out-of-state folks. Do you think there's going to be any issues on page 2 at all where we kind of change things based on the fact if they're Wyoming residents and they're using a city, town, county, or state boat ramp, and they're guiding fishermen again to a location where the lands are owned or leased by Wyoming residents? Is that going to be an issue, do you think, constitutionally, or has anybody looked into that?
Director? do
Yeah,
you want that
Mr.
one?
Chairman, that one was not raised to our attention from the AG's office. The two items that were, though, on page 2, right above that, line 9 and 10, that says that prioritize Wyoming resident professional guides and outfitters. So where you're prioritizing resident over non-resident. And then again, on page 3 at the very bottom, line 20, that entire sentence that goes on to page 4, line 3. So the annual fee established under this subsection may be different for resident and non-resident professional fishing guides or outfitters and shall be a ratio similar to the fee ratio for 12 months resident fishing license and 12 months non-resident fishing license under that statute. So those two items where you're distinguishing a difference between resident and non-resident, we would ask for an amendment to delete those so that it aligns with the Constitution.
Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Director Bruce, I just had a question. Do we do this for anything else? that we, give priority over residents that, we could use as example. I do think residents should get a little bit of a boost if we can figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, I'm not thinking one off the top of my head. I think the discussion in the TRW House regarding this issue was really because our fishing license have a different fee structure, so they were, mirroring that. Again, not an attorney, so I feel a little bit out of my lane speaking here, but I believe the issue is because this is a commercial business rather than the private individual.
Okay, well, Director, we will take that up. I think both of us, all three of us wrote that down, so let's make sure we catch that and, maybe we can suggest that back over to the other side that, so Chief, coming back to you, if I might, can you explain to me how that works up in Teton County? What is, how's your relationship up there with all the entities that you deal with, Park Service, BLM, Forest Service, that river is monitored? Tell me how that works.
Senator Landon, committee members, Representative Byron probably could answer that better than I can. A lot of that is done at the county level, but everybody works together up there, so.
Yeah, Chief, I'll go to the chairman. I meant to ask you that earlier, Representative. So how do you go about floating the snake, and who do you have to check with before you can do that?
Thank you, Chairman. As it comes to commercially, independently and privately, nobody. And that's how we want to keep it. I mean, I don't think we've heard anything in that front. And I want to make sure the record states that, this has nothing to do with the, families going out and going fishing. It becomes when you provide the service and you provide the expertise to knowledge base to share that with folks on the river, whether or not be, floating down the river, tying on flies, having a nice lunch. But it is complicated is the answer. The regulations between the Yellowstone National Park are different than Grand Teton National Park. As soon as you get out of the boundary of Grand Teton National Park, you get into what is our county land. That was recently regulated through a study that was paid for by our county, what we call Wilson to South Park. And then south of South Park, as you go down towards Alpine, which is about 60 miles of water, 4 or 5 full-day stretches. It is regulated by the Bridger Teton National Forest and their rangers. You have a sticker on your boat. It is a permit that a company has, and it allows X amount of boats. Now, if you start to, in the Bridger Teton National Forest specifically, if you begin to, the total boat count amongst all the companies hits a threshold, the following year, you're reduced from 6 commercial boats per company per day down to 4. So it has a kind of a self-regulating system within it. Now on Wilson to South Park, which is really important because that was our most recently regulated piece of water that's owned by our county. And there's a land transfer that happened to make that happen. It allows for the little guy to get in. You can go into the Parks and Rec department. You can, as a first-time outfitter, you can say, hey, I really want to get my foot in the door here. I have this great boat. I've got this knowledge base. I've been working for another outfitter for a number of years, and you can buy a permit for that year. And you can get, a boat a day or 2 boats a day. The more you use it, you begin to build up some chances to have some more use on it. But to really, it's complicated is the answer, but every piece of water up there depends on the jurisdiction you launch on is how they regulate the amount of boats. And some of the folks up in the Grand Teton National Park that have had the permit for decades are permitted a lot of boats, and they don't fill those slots. Some down in the Forest Service don't fill those slots. A number of companies do hit their number. And then they begin to expand out to the salt, to the green, as the director said. And I think it is worth noting, there's a question I didn't hit on page 2, lines 9 and 10. That came through the House amendment, which prioritizes, folks that are, have private land to launch or land on. And I'm glad that did not get brought up as a constitutional concern, because I think it is worth acknowledging those folks that do have, private property rights along the river. That, this is really a jurisdictional issue, Chairman. So it's where the boat and who owns the land where it's launching or landing. And that's why in Teton County, the Fish and Game to my knowledge, doesn't have any access points. They've either turned them over or they're all owned by different jurisdictions, specifically the park, the county, or the BTNF. Now, as soon as you get down to the Salt River, there's a number of launch points that are owned and managed by and certainly in Sublette County, owned and managed by the department.
So on the Snake River, do you ever see our guys, our Wyoming Game and Fish guys?
We are lucky to have great game wardens in our neck of the woods, I think in our whole state, but yes, I get to, one of our game wardens, who is a Thermopolis native, actually, will appear in a kayak, a hardshell kayak sometimes, and pull right up to you and check your licenses and check your, make sure if you are keeping fish, to make sure you're within the regulations. And they're often at the boat ramps, and, it comes in ebbs and flows. Sometimes you see a lot. I've had the great fortune often on the green to run into game wardens in my guiding career, but at that point, Chairman, they're just checking your license. There's nothing else they're checking, so I guess as a commercial outfitter, it's weird to say this, but would I like to see them every day? Absolutely. But generally the industry is pretty trustworthy, and folks know that you do have to get that license. And now it's so easy on your phone that there's no reason you shouldn't. So we see them a lot, and I acknowledge that, and I think it's great.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jones and then Senator Schuler, both of them have questions.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Byron, the permit that Teton County issues, is it just one? Does it give a preference to resident or non-resident?
It does not, and I am also not a lawyer, but I think you do, and this was discussed through the interim topic, and as these different bills have come forward in the last 4 or 5 years, that you get into issues with interstate commerce. That's a very broad statement, and I don't want to narrow it down at all, because like I said, I'm not an attorney, but that seems to be the continual issue here, and it transpires to the hunting guide world too. That being said, we have a number of outfitters in our state that go guide in other places too, that have permits in different states far, far away, and vice versa. So there is no preference, and we have multiple Idaho guides that have permits, not only on the BTNF, but also in the forest, also in the Park Service, and also in our little county stretch. And as a newly permitted stretch, it is not a requirement or a prerequisite or something they can say yes or no based off of your residence.
Thank you, Chairman. We want to be careful with those tariffs, that's for sure. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, the commission right now can regulate, obviously, the number of these boats. And will this advisory board kind of tie in with you guys in terms of looking at data, saying, which areas are really being, where we've got the overuse and that sort of thing? I still kind of wondering about the commercial guided fishing advisory board, how they will fit in with what we're doing here.
Yeah, good question. Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, we've had that question as well. Our commission does represent the public and is dispersed across the state. This is something that they maybe feel that they can do without the advisory board. Continuing to digest this and think about the advantages that advisory board could add, because this has been looked at a lot, maybe that advisory board can really look at who we regulate, how we regulate, and really dive in deeper, and then bring that back to the commission. And I think also this body, I think it says in November, as we talked about, we've discussed this a lot. And so maybe if they can help sort that out about what that looks like, there could be benefits to that. I will add to note, you do have our fiscal note, I think, in front of you. I always point out that fiscal expense. And so we did some rough numbers on this advisory board over the next year, and it probably adds around $50,000 to our workload each year we would have it. Just something to consider. We want to thank the sponsor. He did have a sister bill to this that increased non-resident fishing license to help with the expenses of this effort. However, that bill did not go forward. So over the next 3 years, I do understand that the commission is a may regulate and may register, but if we were to go forward with all of this, including the advisory board in 3 years, we're looking at roughly about $1 million on the department. So no small feat whatsoever, but you know, I'm thinking if we spend time with those expertise on that advisory board, we could maybe sort out what this does exactly look like going forward.
So Director, do you feel like this gives you the flexibility to maybe not do very much at all? I mean, you might look at this and discover, you know what, the juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze, or what do you think on that?
Very fair question, Mr. Chairman. You know, because of the other two components, the registration and the regulation are May, I think that allows for that flexibility you're talking about. However, because it would be in state statute, there's going to be some level of expectation that we do go forward with it. So that part is concerning, and again, that workload put on us. So that's where, again, that advisory board to maybe tease this out with maybe that acknowledgement, if that advisory board working with alongside our commission comes back in November and reports to you, hey, we have thought this through and we recommend this method or a different method, for that flexibility to remain for whatever that outcome is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the department? Senator Hicks.
Well, maybe for both of us, if we could get a good chairman from the House committee. to come
Yeah,
up.
Mr. Chairman, come
And I
on back up.
apologize, Mr. Chairman, I had to go up in another committee over there and had to wrestle with the House committee a little bit.
Good. I
Got a
hope
little
you
roughed
pinned him.
up, so, you know, if I'm a little flustered here, just kind of go with me.
That's all right. We'll give you a little leeway here.
So
Senator,
on
go ahead.
page 2, line 9, and it talks about this section there, and the state shall, any lawful ratio that prioritizes Wyoming resident professional guides and outfitters. What's that mean? Prioritize how that all Wyoming guides come before, or a percentage of Wyoming guides come before? And I don't understand, because typically, particularly with game and fish, I'm familiar, we do allocations. So many permits are allocated to residents, so many allocated to non-residents. There's usually an allocation, not necessarily what I would call a prioritization. So I'm just trying to understand, what's the practical application of saying that they're prioritized?
Chairman, maybe start with what that conversation was on the other side.
Thank you,
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
and thank you, Senator Hicks, for the question. And I'm not sure when you walked in the conversation this morning, but there has been an opinion shared, it sounds like. I just heard about it this morning, that this likely will have to get stricken from the bill to proceed for maybe the reasons you're getting at, which following your lead here. But the conversation on the other side was, you know, there's a lot of pride in Wyoming's waterways and fisheries, and the thought was to keep this bill moving. On the other side, how do we honor that, and how do we honor, you know, the Wyoming outfitters that have been at this for a while? But ultimately, and this is something I've agreed with, and ultimately I think it would be very nearly impossible to do that. Hard for me to say because I like the concept, but certainly as some of our guides cross borders and guide in other states, you know, see issues that if they're doing that to us. Now, there are sections of water, and maybe this is something this advisory board can contemplate. You know, in Montana, on a commercially guided trip, you can't fish certain sections of waters on Sundays if you're a non-resident. So there are, this is happening in some other states, but certainly this language that you're concerned about or bringing up for maybe discussion is something that kind of came late in the game, was not part of the interim. And while I think it would be really great to have, I think it is maybe a step that, especially with the constitutional issues, that just would not be supported in this bill.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Director, anything? I want to give the
Yeah,
director.
it does look like a Commerce Clause issue, and I know there's one Supreme Court case that was a landmark case that talked about selling bait across state lines, so I think it floating boats might be a little more interesting than that case, but yes.
No, Senator, I think that's a good catch, and Senator Schuler prompted that discussion a little bit earlier. And the director, I want to get back to you and give you an opportunity, any additional thoughts you have there. You know, my goal would be to try to work this bill so that we can get it in the best form we can. And then, of course, we'll have to get together with our good chairman and some other folks from the other side. But any further thoughts on page 2?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'll just reiterate for Senator Hicks that our AG's office did flag that for us exactly for the purpose of what you said, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Did you have anything else,
Yeah,
Senator
Mr.
Hicks?
Chairman,
Go
so the
ahead.
next section down there, just an explanation, is it says where you can start from any city, town, county, or state boat ramp or other access point for commercially guided fishing, boat guide, if he is a Wyoming resident and is guiding the fishermen to locate where the lands are owned or leased by the Wyoming resident or the Wyoming resident's immediate family. What are we trying to get that to there?
Mr. Chairman,
go
I'll
ahead.
take that because that was an amendment that came on the House side, if I may. Senator Hicks, where we are getting at with that is there are a number of privately held pieces of land, specifically think about large ranches on a number of these stretches that are discussed. And the feedback, when we got it through the House on the TRW House side was folks that were saying, wait, we launch on our land and we might have 7 miles of river and then we take out on our land, or maybe we end up at a boat ramp that happens to be owned and managed by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So that's really where we're getting at with that piece of language. Now, that being said, in a number of these cases, I'll use Warren Bridge, for example, there's private lands above there, and if you launch on your private land and you take out at Warren Bridge, you are technically using a BLM access point, and you are required to have a permit to take out at Warren Bridge. The enforcement of that is, to be left out in the windy plains of Wyoming, but that is how that works. It's same thing in our county. There are a number of ranches that allow people to launch on their private land, and then you take out on maybe a county piece of land, and they have to have a permit for that takeout spot. So the concept, Senator Hicks, was, I think coming out of the central part of the state where, if we have a ranch big enough or a relationship with a neighboring ranch where we launch on our private land and take out on our private land, really at that point in Wyoming, and once again, I'm not a lawyer, where did you touch state land? It's our water. So I think it was a request that came over from the House side that said, hey, we've secured these ranch leases, we've done this. This is another burden. We'll comply where it's necessary when we do have, specific access points that we do need to have, potentially down the road have these permits. But it was more of a acknowledgement that these folks have already gone down this path, and this next layer certainly weakens it because we're trying to get a number and we're trying to figure out how many of these folks are out there. But at the same time, I think it's such a small percentage right now that I was fine moving forward with that specific language.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go
if
ahead,
I can
Senator.
follow up, it just strikes me again so if I'm gonna launch my boat and float down to a section where I have leased, that's what we're contemplating here. A Wyoming resident doesn't have to have a permit, but a non-resident, even though they're paying a lease for that private property, they have to have a permit. And again, they're going to fish the private property the way that that's structured here. It almost looks to me like that's a cause of action for almost, again, I think if you've got private property leased and you're gonna launch at a public site, as long as you don't fish until you get to that, I think that's pretty hard just to fence somebody that's spending a lot of money to lease that out, to then put another regulatory burden on them to get to their legal contractualized obligation that they have with that private. I think it sets up a potential lawsuit is what I see coming.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Go ahead,
I agree,
Chairman.
Senator Hicks, and I think that there's probably an easy amendment in there to just strike that Wyoming resident, because there are a number of folks that and there's also a number of outfitters and folks that might be coming to guide for the summer that don't happen to be Wyoming residents. We have a lot of Idaho residents that are guiding in our neck of the woods legally, perfectly fine, that are permitted and have the lease with the ranch or have the permit with the Bridger Teton National Forest. So, yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and certainly I would kind of contemplate that if you are so desire in that larger amendment to try to narrow this to avoid any sort of speed bumps along the way.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I was just sitting here thinking of our wardens sorting all this out. Yikes. As far as you know, we haven't fished all the way down the 7 miles until we got right here. Warden, you bet. So, thanks again, Chairman. Committee, any other questions for the department before we let them sit back and relax for a minute and get to further testimony. Okay, let's do that. Thank you, Department. Appreciate you guys. Would anyone else like to come forward on House Bill 5 this morning and testify? Good morning, welcome. And then we've got several streaming in, and we'll try to get to everyone after we get to folks here in the room. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And I wanted to talk a little bit, mention what I talked about on the House side as well, as we're thinking about this bill, is we have one of the best resources in the country. I think it's very easy to say that. In our fishing, in our hunting, and all of that. We also have, a pretty remote state, and people are starting to see the value of coming and recreating here because of that. So we are starting to see the pressures coming from the state above and the state below and the states to the side. We have a really unique spot here in Wyoming, and I commend the sponsor of this bill for seeing this and trying, putting something in front of you to start looking at how we deal with that. My one contention here is that it's pretty narrow. We're looking at fishing right now, but this is not the only thing that's coming. It's wildlife photography tours, it's whitewater rafting, it's mountain biking, it's OHV use, it's commercial outfitting in many, many forms. And I hesitate to put something on the game and fish that is so specific to one specific piece of outfitting when we're going to be looking at a huge wave coming down. And I think I would urge to figure out how we look at this bill and set them up for success. I'm not saying we need to kill this bill, but I want to look at how we move this bill forward. Because you look at the three sections. The first section is the authority, sort of the authority to regulate. That's dollars and personnel. That's sportsman dollars and personnel. And those dollars and that personnel is going to be pulled from doing other resource work in science to manage a commercial outfitting thing that does not have damage on the resource. It has damage on the experience right now. On the second one is creating an advisory board, which we just heard is about $50,000. I actually really like this part because I do agree. We've sat through many, many interim committees trying to figure this out. We do need to figure out what's going on. I actually really like the advisory board, but that is dollars and personnel as well. And the third part, if they choose to enact any of these, the permits, is also added personnel and dollars. All of three of these are an expense. And at that expense comes the loss of other programs, the loss of figuring out how we hatch cold water fisheries in our hatcheries, how we add to a resource and rebuild stream banks, how we work to have BDAs and habitat work so that we don't have runoff or anything else, an actual resource issue. Right now, we are not at that resource issue. We're starting here. It's coming though. So I'm not saying do nothing. What I want to talk about is how Idaho does this. Idaho has a board of outfitters, and fishing's included. So are many other things. So maybe with this advisory board comes the opportunity to really look at how other states are doing this and are roping it all in so that we're not just prepared for fishing and the expansion of fishing and guiding, but we're prepared for the expansion of whitewater rafting. We're prepared for the expansion of mountain bikes. We're prepared for the expansion of wildlife photography and all of the above. But we're not saddling the department with something that they, down the road, are still stuck with this authority when it should be somewhere else. So I would offer a couple of amendments, which is strike subsection A. Offer a sunset to this bill in a year or two that gives the department the authority to go and build this advisory board, have an outcome, come back to you with a solution, and be able to move this forward in a way that's good for the state in the long term and not saddling the department with a commercial authority management when we could have a state board that is probably more flexible and more, maybe makes more sense to have a commercial outfitting authority stuck in. Because I really hear this, and we hear it from everyone. This is a really important issue, and it is a matter of time before it becomes a resource damage, and we do not want it to see it get there. But I don't want the game and fish 15 years down the road to be managing commercial fishing, and then we have a state board for wildlife photography and state board for hunting and a state board for everything else, and for some reason the game and fish is still stuck doing commercial management authority.
So, Ms. Johnson, you hit some nails on the head. I appreciate your comments. You know, I was thinking, as I read through this bill this weekend, this has kind of been the common theme of this session. We're beginning to realize that as we creep housing developments up into the foothills and we have more and more people coming and building houses along our stream banks and just more and more people, I think this is going to be our common theme. We're going to have to wrestle with this on all fronts, and this is just one of them. It's pretty startling what has happened in my neck of the woods. It's a beautiful, wonderful blue ribbon, amazing trout stream, and the whole world knows it. And so, questions for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation? Couple of good considerations there, I think, that were thrown out.
I would offer that as we
Yeah.
do, this is the first sort of low-hanging fruit, other than the hunting one that we're looking at. And if we get this one wrong, we will get the rest of them wrong, because we will not be setting up a good sort of system to look at how we do it. And I hate to see us saddle our department consistently when their budget is not growing. You heard, we've tried to be getting, something through to offer them some relief to that. So when these bills come in front of us that cost dollars, that comes from somewhere else, and it's usually at the expense of the science and the research.
Thank you for that. Questions? Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Johnson.
you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Anyone else in the room like to come forward and visit about House Bill 5? Okay, let's go to those streaming in. Sue, if you bring them in, I guess, in order. And we are on House Bill 5 tonight. I see where a couple of folks have written down other bill numbers in their desire to testify. We will not testify on any other bills except House Bill 5 this morning. And if we get to it, the second bill, we would certainly hear testimony there too. But Ms. Carpenter waiting, I see, or who do you have?
Mr. Chairman, I have Ryan Hudson first.
Okay, let's get Mr. Hudson from the great town of Daniel, where I grew up. So how about that? Mr. Hudson, welcome. Okay, you're muted, Mr. Hudson. We need you to unmute, and we look forward to your comments.
There we go. You got me?
We got you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's been insightful and interesting to sit here and listen to it. I want to thank Chairman Byron for his testimony and all his work and articulating of the bill. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mata, obviously Daniel, been a fishing guide since 2004. I started with Andrew Byron actually back in those days. He was my first friend I ever made in the state of Wyoming. So we've been batting this idea back and forth for quite a few years. And it's interesting to see where it's at now. It seems like it's made a lot of traction this year. And I like a lot of it. The one thing in there is, in section 1, subsection A, the last line is, what has been brought up previously today or this morning is that, putting in on a state or municipal land and taking out on a private piece. And, for me, that one there kind of hits me pretty good, because a lot of the problems we see here is those situations. So we really don't solve the problem. Case in point, the Daniel Bridge, and I don't know how this would fall into the regulation here, but just up from Daniel Bridge is the hatchery boat ramp, which is a Game and Fish. Go down, or you put in there and you float down to the Daniel Bridge. It's a nice full day float. That's an unpermitted section. The Daniel Bridge is private. It's open to everybody. And that float there is kind of near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorites. It fishes very well, but it gets a lot of pressure because it's the closest to Jackson. It's the closest to Idaho that doesn't require any sort of permitting. It's right here behind my house, and I maybe float it once a year. And I've been here for, since 2004. Another thing I see with that is, you look on the encampment, you can put in on some state stuff. You float down into that canyon there. There's a lot of private land. the North Platte there in Carbon County. Don't want to throw out some names, but the Silver Spur, the A-Bar A, and what's the other big one there? Old Baldy. They got a lot of private ramps that, this bill sets up a loophole for these guys to kind of keep doing what they're doing. And the guys like us that are, struggling to get a foothold or have got a foothold after a lot of years and have a few permits, but not a lot, I think we're still going to see the problem. Same thing up in Casper. You got the, crazy rainbow. You can put in and take out on that section and won't, in theory, you are excluded from this bill. So, but like Andrew said, there's a lot of, different circumstances around the state, and each one is very partial. I mean, there's so many jurisdictions on all of our rivers. The Green especially is one of them here. I mean, from the National Forest Service clear down to Flaming Gorge. I mean, you get into even grazing association lands, and technically they require a permit, but there's no enforcement. Just like the state lands, they require a permit, but there's no enforcement. The BLM, you need a permit, there's some enforcement, but then we're getting back to the enforceable side of things and how feasible that really is. So,
Well, Mr. Hudson, thank you. We appreciate your comments. It's a tough issue. But boy, do we love that part of the world where you're camping right now. It's good stuff. I grew up there, so right over there at the fish hatchery. Thanks for being here this morning. We're
You
gonna
bet.
we're gonna keep going. We've got several people who want to visit with us too. If you keep bringing them in, that would be great.
Mr. Chairman, it'll be Paul Newman next.
Okay. Mr. Newman, good morning. Mr. Newman, we had you and lost you. And Sue, I want to hear from the Wyoming folks first. I see where we've got an out-of-state visitor or two, and that's fine, but I want to get to our Wyoming guys if we can. Any luck, Sue?
Mr. Chairman, Blake Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Jackson is who that is, by golly. Good morning. Good to see
Good
you.
morning.
Thanks for being here. Take it away. We're anxious to hear from you.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Blake Jackson. I'm one of the owners here at the Ugly Bug Fly Shop and Crazy Rainbow Fly Fishing here in Casper, Wyoming, as well as the leasee of the largest private land section on the Gray Reef River here on the North Platte. Here to speak in favor of this bill. I think we've covered many of the issues with the bill or somewhat issues with it. Wanted to clarify a few things. I think the intent of the private land clause that was written in there was to mirror the big game hunting statute or the big game hunting line item where it allows a big game outfitter to outfit on their private property. So it was pretty much trying to mirror that sort of situation where you could outfit on your private land without the need for an outfitter's license. Also, some of the concerns with the Commerce Clause, I think, we're in a unique position here in the state of Wyoming, unlike some of our surrounding states that are really wild fisheries, because because our Game and Fish does supplement and support stocking programs within our fisheries. In speaking with our lawyer, who unfortunately was unable to testify today, had some issues with the link, but in speaking with him, due to the fact that the Game and Fish spends so much money and resources in stocking, it presents a unique issue with our Commerce Clause, that we could, potentially have different regulations than what other states do. But all in all, I think it's due time that we come up with some sort of program. I started my guide career in Montana and was involved in that program, involved in their outfitter program back as early as 99, 2000. Kind of saw, how that has improved and come together. We're in a unique situation here in Wyoming that we do not require a state guide license. So many of the guides within the state of Wyoming don't have insurance, necessarily aren't the sort of folks I think that would even qualify for insurance sometimes. We have, few outfitters here in the state have went through some unique situations with this through Wyoming Workforce Services, like ourselves, being audited. They're explaining that we're required to hire our employees or our fishing guides as employees due to the insurance that we would like them to have, or the fact that we're requiring them to have a base knowledge of information. So a bill like this moving forward does help us clean up the business aspects of how, what this looks like in Wyoming, how to employ fishing guides if they're independent contractors or employees. This really kind of lays out the framework and mapping where that gets much cleaner. And obviously lends a level of professionalism that I would love to see take place. I'm very concerned that we've been very fortunate so far to not have a non-permitted or a non-regulated guide or non-insured guide have a serious incident within the state, but it's coming. Unfortunately, it's coming. At some point, we're going to have a fly-by-night fishing guide that isn't permitted or regulated, and they're going to unfortunately have an incident, and it's going to create some blowback. So I very much look forward to, hopefully this can pass. Hopefully the advisory board can come up with some good ways to move this forward. We do have some great examples with Idaho and Montana and our surrounding states. And hopefully we can take bits and pieces of those and come up with a really good plan moving forward, and something that we can all be happy with. So I would be happy to answer any questions or lend any knowledge if I can help.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Really appreciate you being here this morning. Committee, any questions for one of our best who knows that Platte River pretty well? Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Appreciate it. We're going to work this bill hard, and appreciate you chiming in this morning. Okay, who do we have next?
Mr. Newman is ready for us now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes,
Good
if
morning.
you introduce yourself for the record, and welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator. My name is Paul Newman. I own Drift LLC, guide service out of Saratoga, Wyoming. I've been guiding in the Saratoga area since 2004. Owned Drift since 2015.
Go ahead, Mr. Newman. We're anxious to what you think about this bill.
I like it. I mean, my concerns are with, everyone else, with like Ryan, expressed his concern with Section 1A, the excluding those folks that are taken out on private land. My part of the world, that's a big issue. The majority of the players, the big players, own or lease land. And they, by in large, are the ones that are putting the most pressure on the resource. The small town local guys, we have maybe, 4 to 6 guides. These outfits are running, 10 to 20. And, by and large, the majority of them are non-residents. The guy that owns the land or leases the land may be a resident or considered a resident. Whether he actually resides in Wyoming the whole year, that's, no one knows. But so that's my major concern is, that they are by far in my area putting the majority of the pressure on the resource, and to exclude them from this seems very unfair to me and the other small town local outfitters.
Mr. Newman, thank you. Any questions for Drift LLC out of Saratoga? It's good to hear from you this morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Let's keep going, Sue. And
Mr. Chairman, I've invited Carlton to the room. However, it could be a typo if he or she is not wanting to speak on this bill.
okay. So let's move on past Mr. Tyre, I guess, or Tier. And anyone else want to testify?
I don't have anybody for this bill.
Okay, Sue, thank you very much. Again, anyone else in the room want to testify on this bill? Okay, I'm going to close testimony on the bill, committee. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Okay, it's moved by Schuler. Committee, we've heard a lot this morning about some things. I, for one, would love to get out of here with something. There's been a lot of work put in on this front. I'm going to say up front, I'm concerned about the impact to the department. We can touch on that maybe at the end of the bill. Without any fee structure to help out, I'm worried about that. But let's start through the bill. What are we going to do with page 2?
I've got an amendment. Oh, go ahead.
Let's start with
Before we-
Senator Hicks and,
Before we work the bill, can I
yeah.
ask a question?
absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, and just a little input from the committees, given your concern, I think many of us share that concern. So are we at the point now, because it will really dictate the nature of the amendments and some of the suggestions. Are we at the point that we want to have the Game and Fish Department now step in and play a significant role in regulating this industry? Are we at the point where we just want to get the advisory board set up and get registration fees, other than to the point that we're actually into, maybe we should walk before we run here? But I'm trying to get a feeling for the committee to understand what kind of amendments that we need to get to, I think, the direction you want to go, Mr. Chairman.
No, I think that's very well articulated, Senator. We've got a couple levels to consider here. The advisory board, I'm hearing a lot of support for that. The step further is where some of us, I think, are wrestling with what you just said. Are we ready to dive into the deep water here? I do want to speak to all of our folks back home, because we've got a stretch of river that is a real concern. It also represents a significant impact to the economy of Wyoming up there. I mean, it's in the 10 to 12 million dollar. It's an industry that is really going strong. So I want to be careful with it, but I've been listening to my guys up in that neck of the woods, and they really would like to have something done. So good stuff, Senator. Senator Schuler.
Yeah, I agree. We worked this bill for 2 years, and I think the fact that we have so many mays instead of shalls, I think this will help our game and fish folks, because they may set limits, and they may promulgate rules. I think we're not saying you shall do this, but at least we're giving them the tools to at least start looking at the places where we're having some issues and decide whether or not that's going to be something that they're going to have to slow it down or shut down or whatever. I think that advisory board, that kind of gives me, even though it's going to cost a little bit of money, I think that's probably what we need to do, is have a couple of the commercial guys that are on that board, so that they can kind of take a look at the data and say, here's where we are, and And then also there is a portion in there where if they decide to slow some things down, they're gonna have public meetings in each county. I think that's good. And I think, you know, we're only talking 3 or 4 different places where I think it's gonna get, or it maybe is already out of hand, but I think doing the may instead of shall, I think that kind of gives our game fish some leeway.
Senator Jones, anything?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Hicks.
So and again, I don't want to derail this. I think this has been an issue. You know, we've got friends that over in the western part of the state that this was something that it's becoming more of an issue everywhere. It seems to me given the way the bill's structured, what we may want to do is get this advisory board set up, have them start looking at this. I think before we can even track the industry, we need to know how many people are in the industry. And so I think we need to get the registrations set up and get those fees in place, getting back to the cost of the department. Once that revenue starts to come in, then they have some fees to start doing this. So I guess when I look at this, a logistical thing to move this forward is get the advisory committee set up, get the registration and the fees set up as a tracking and a revenue source of money coming in. A year from now, we can start to set the regulatory framework up for this. And so that would be my suggestion if we, want to work this bill, is to move in that direction, is to get those 2 components in place and then bring in, this will be another interim topic to start working on, and then start bringing in that regulatory framework from the department. Once we have better information, how many non-residents, where are they at? Anyway, that'd be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Jones.
doesn't this kind of set that up that way? It says, with all the mays, that it gives them that leeway to start it up and get it going.
So, Director, would you mind coming up for a quick visit on that front? I think you can see where our concerns are and where the committee would like to try to hone in on. Does this bill already give you the ability to walk before we run here, or talk to us about Senator Hicks's thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Senators, very good question, good discussion. Because those 2 mays, I think, therefore we don't have to do anything right away with regulatory. So I get what you're saying. It does, though, however, paint that picture that we will, and it'll be the Game and Fish's entity that does. So a little bit concerned there about the message it sends, not so much officially, because it does say the may. So that's where the suggestion of maybe amending it, that first section A might be warranted, so it doesn't paint that picture. And then once we, spend the next 6 months-ish working with TRW interim committee and working with the advisory committee, maybe we frame up then what that regulatory piece looks like together.
Thank you, Director. Any questions of Director Bruce?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator.
I just think in my adult lifetime, where the department used to license big game outfitters and all the reasons that we got away from that and set up an independent licensure board. And I see this moving in the same direction. I think that makes more sense to me. But again, I do not want to put this duty on the department that they are going to be the licensure board under the current framework of this.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in the same place. And, this report back, I'd like to structure it so that we have that report, in the fall, having seated an advisory group and gotten the ball rolling. I agree with Senator Hicks. I think then you can begin to decide if you want more in the green books, and you want, I'm going to be a little bit concerned about making sure that we can fund what we're doing, because I agree with testimony this morning. We don't want to be pulling these kind of resources away from all the important things we're doing elsewhere too. But I do want to do what we can to help on this front. So, well, let's work the bill. I think, committee, maybe we can work on paragraph A on page 2. Senator Schuler.
I've got an amendment there. Mr. Chairman, I think if we start on line 9 and put after state a period, I think we can probably delete the rest of that paragraph. Originally, I was just going to delete in a lawful ratio that prioritizes Wyoming resident professional guides and outfitters, but then the more we hear about it, I think we probably need to amend the rest of, just delete the rest of that paragraph.
Okay,
That would be my suggestion.
so the proposed amendment, Sue, would be to put a period after the word state on line 9 and then delete the remainder of paragraph A. Committee,
We don't think,
discussion?
we don't think
Go
we
ahead,
want to
Senator.
leave in that prioritizing of the Wyoming residents, since I thought we were going to be able to leave that in without causing problems.
I think the AG was the one that said that that was a.
That A was okay, right? It was later on that wasn't?
Promise clause issue.
I think Senator Jones, that prioritizes Wyoming residents over non-residents. I think that's where the Attorney General had some heartburn. And so,
As much as I'd like to be there.
yeah, I mean, I think we know where we want to go, and I bet you the advisory board can maybe get there by fall and report back to us. So I don't think we lose that sentiment, but anyway, so further discussion on striking that language. To give everyone a chance to make sure what we're doing here.
Mr.
Anything?
Chairman, I'm going to
Senator
support
Hicks.
the amendment, but my preference would be to strike all of section A, because I do think it sets up that the commission's going to be the regulatory entity for guide fishing boats. I mean, that's what it says up there. And it says may set limits or otherwise. And we can certainly come back but keep in mind, anything we pass out goes into the green books, and then, 12 months later, we may be back repealing what we did this year. And so I'm reluctant I'll support the amendment, then my second part would be just to delete the entire section A.
There, that's, again, good thought, Senator. I think I'm going to lean toward leaving that language in, just simply, sometimes it helps for us to know where we're heading. And we could, in the fall, I think we can revisit this. We can steer it in a different direction. But in the meantime, I think it sends a message out across our state that we're serious about this, and we're trying to work on our waterways. So I probably would favor leaving some of that language in there as a guidepost, but any other discussion on the proposed amendment? Okay, all in favor of Senator Schuler's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That amendment passes. Anything further on page 2? What about page 3?
Mr. Chairman, I just trying to see here whether we need to include down on page 2, line 21. It talks about the commission down there. I'm just wondering, we don't have a definition, and maybe it's already in this, it's already in Title 23, so it's fine. We don't need to call out Game and Fish Commission since Title 23.
Senator Hicks, there was some concern early, I don't know if you were here yet, but that final sentence on page 3, going all the way over onto page 4, I believe the department suggested that we may want to strike that language.
I'll make that motion.
So beginning on
Line 20.
line 20, page 3, Sue, beginning with the word "the" and annual, and all the way over, did we strike the whole thing then, Senator Schuler, or just strike down to the
I think the director mentioned
232201D?
line 3, but I don't know, do you want to?
Director, thank you. Can you give us a little guidance?
Yeah,
Bottom
Mr.
of page
Chairman,
3
so
there.
this was added in TRW House. So page 3, line 20, the annual fee, start there. And then end after that statute on line 3, page 4. So keep a registration sticker shall be displayed. Keep that last sentence would be the recommendation.
So the issue, Director, is that the language that says it may be different from resident and non-resident. And that, again, gave a little bit of heartburn to the Attorney General. Yep, thank you. Okay, further discussion on that proposed amendment?
So we're on page 3 at the bottom, not
We're at
page 2.
page 3 at the bottom. If I said 2, I apologize. Page 3 at the bottom. Final 4 lines over to the third line on page 4. Everybody understand? All in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no?
No.
Okay, so that amendment passes.
Mr. Chairman,
Sue,
who moved that amendment? I'm sorry.
that again was moved by Senator Schuler.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Any desire to reinsert a fee?
no, what I'd like to do is move back up to, if we're on page 3.
Okay,
So one of the things that seems to me is a little bit of a deficiency. When we set up an advisory board, typically whether it's a commission advisory board or anything else, that the state provides financial per diem for those boards to do that. There's no provision in the bill to do, and I don't know if we can pull it in, but it would be inconsistent with what we normally do for boards and commissions, is provide that the per diem and salary for those folks. And I don't know if you want to pull that in somewhere on line 8, or at this point in time, they're just going to be complete volunteers.
well, that is one of the issues. And Chairman, do you have a minute to remind us what the discussion was on the other side? And, you know, I'm always inclined to try to pay for what we expect folks to do.
But, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the leeway, and Senator Hicks, I appreciate the question. I concur with you. I think that this bill, as it came out of the interim and into our committee, was in good shape. And I appreciate the work that my colleagues did, but when you begin to get into this arena,
Environment.
environment, get to this whitewater, if you will, you know, it begins to get murky. And I think that the intent was very positive, and I think it is, I continue to ask of the commission and the Game and Fish Department, and that does not, that is not lost on me, or the House TRW. That being said, I think that there was contemplation on, you know, do they meet once? Do they meet? The bill's not effective until July, so, you know, do we consider that? Do you guys think about that? I mean, is there time? I mean, what happens in the fishing world is they're starting to guide right now in these areas, and they're gonna be very busy, the outfitters, until the water gets low, and then we'll be past this enactment date. So, I mean, we're really thinking, in my head, out a whole nother year, you know, at least on the lower house, I could be gone by the time this happens, you know, or many of my colleagues that brought some of this. So I think Senator Hicks brings up a very good point. I would certainly be supportive. The issue with the current climate is, would that, you know, that appropriation certainly defeat the bill generally. But they did acknowledge that I had a sister bill to this that never did make it out of the House side. I've ran many times to try to offset some of these substantial costs that are coming with asking. And I think, you know, just for, if I may, Mr. Chairman, a little leeway here.
Absolutely.
The concept of an advisory board and talking to the department is great. And Senator Schuler could chime in. We can sit here and say we want a fishing outfitter board all we want, but that was heavily talked about in the interim. And if we think this advisory board is expensive, all of a sudden we're getting into a situation, and I appreciate the Outfitters and Guides Association for contemplating this, and Jess's comments that there's a broader discussion to be had here. But ultimately, you know, they're running at a break even, the Outfitters and Guide Board, a break even revenue stream right now, you know, if they're lucky. So when us not knowing if there's 250 or 1,000 fishing guide outfitters in Wyoming was why we went away from that concept, because we didn't know. And also we have a lot of boards statewide that are open right now. Can we fill a standard, you know, contemplate a standard size board to fully regulate this industry and not give it a game fish? I mean, I think that's a conversation of this good committee, but ultimately, I don't think, I think an appropriation is appropriate. And, you know, if I am so choose to maybe be in conference, I would certainly support that because I don't want to strap the department with any more costs. I will lean on some of you folks that have been in it longer than me to maybe amend that in here, and you have my support on it because, you know, do you meet once, Senator Hicks? Do you, we're already, it's crazy, but we're already up against a bit of a time crunch here, and with the enactment date, but also giving the department leeway to get some of this figured out. I mean, that's a decision for you folks to make and for maybe to send back our direction. But I think you have to compensate them, Senator Hicks, because we have a big state and we're traveling a long ways to come have these conversations.
You know,
Maybe we do that during an interim, one of our meetings in Casper and bookend it, but that's for, the committee to contemplate.
Chairman, one of my concerns is if we do too much and try to send it back over, you did a great job of shepherding this thing to this point, and I think it's an important issue. So I would like to at least get something accomplished. I feel like the committee feels the same way I do. My fear is if we stick the money piece in there, we may have to tighten our belt and get through a year where we at least get some folks seated and to the table, count on Director Bruce and her great folks to come back to us in the fall, maybe by that third meeting, just to let us know where we stand on all this. We've got a great joint committee, and I think we could stand something up at that point. So maybe Senator, what we do is be a little careful on the money front, knowing it's going to impact our department a little bit to get this going. But we can maybe address that a little bit later, would be my thought. But
Yeah, Mr.
Chairman, does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, I
We'll go
agree,
back
and we
to
could
Senator.
I could support that heading into our final meeting, if we have it next fall and going into a budget session, hey, we have the framework and this is the actual cost of maybe one meeting, maybe 1 2-day meeting, or maybe multiple meetings. But
And that
I
might be the point that we
I do
steer it
think
in
that there's a
steer it in
chance,
a different direction.
the
I
more
mean,
this gets amended, the less appetite there'll be on the other side.
That's my fear. So Senator Hicks, is
So,
that kind of?
Mr. Chairman, it's going to be probably pretty heavily amended. So typically what we do is we include language and says that the one that you see the most in the statute is the advisory board will be compensated at the same rate as the legislature. There is no appropriation necessarily in the bill itself, but that language, and I think we can pull out, I mean, when I was on management council, we looked at this, and there's 20 different ways Game and Fish Commission's compensated different than the Highway Commission and the Water Development Commission, but yet what you see is the common language is the advisory board would be compensated at the same rate of the legislature for per diem.
We could maybe get
That's just language,
away
it's
with
not
that,
an
and
appropriation.
knowing that it's coming out of our game and fish funds to pull these people together.
It's just a thought.
For this year at least, I would suggest maybe we do that. I like the advisory board. I like the message that this bill sends. Like Ms. Johnson pointed out earlier, this is the beginning of lots of discussions like this that we're going to be having, folks, because more and more folks are coming to Wyoming to enjoy the great outdoors. And so hopefully we can keep this moving. I think, thank you, Chairman. If you wanted to stay right there, that'd be great. Senator, do you want to
Mr.
suggest an
Chairman, the other
amendment
one
then?
I had is more of a conforming, so on page 3, line 11, we talk about commercial guided fishing boats launching into using, I think that's probably fine. The question I had here is if you actually go up to line 10, and so the commission may promulgate rules governing the registration. The question I have again is and means of tracking and the number of commercially guided boats. Should we just strike and the means of tracking the number? And so the commission may promulgate rules governing the registration of commercially guided fishing boats launching in, and get rid of the whole tracking thing at this point in time. I think that's something that should come back.
I would agree.
It just puts a duty on the department. It's a may, but I think it's premature that the game wardens are going to be out there counting boats. That's my concern.
My only hesitation, Senator, would be, this summer is the diving board into this, and this does give us some language to encourage folks to get about tracking some numbers. I mean, that's what I'd be doing. If this bill passes, I would certainly think the department's gonna be doing that anyway. We could strike the language
It's
or
not a
leave it
big
in.
deal, Mr.
So,
Chairman, just,
Mr. Chairman, I think that's kind of
Senator
one of the reasons for the bill is to try to figure out how many places are overly used or how they need to limit the use in some areas.
So Senator Jones, good point. In the fall, if we take this back up, Mr. Chairman, one of the first questions we're going to ask Director Bruce and her staff is, how many boats do we have on the Platte River? Maybe they can begin to get an idea of that this summer. Maybe, I think we have a little bit of an idea already, but anyway, either way.
I'm not married to that.
Okay,
So
so,
one other question, Mr. Chairman, and we see this as a conforming, so on page 3, line 17, and then it says, so if we read that whole sentence, the rules shall require registration and payment of an annual fee for each commercially guided fishing boat and vehicle or trailer. So it's gonna require at least 2 different registrations there, the way I read that. So you're gonna get a registration on your boat and or your trailer. And I'm trying to figure out why because again, you're gonna have non-residents, residents, the way it's potentially set up. And how do they determine whether they get their vehicle or their trailer registered? And maybe the chairman can, I don't understand why we're calling 2 registrations and then we call out either a vehicle or a trailer.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I want to take this up in the fall.
go ahead, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Clear the water
Chairman.
for us.
Senator Hicks, just from institutional knowledge, what we're dealing with is when a boat launches on the river, there's not necessarily someone there to watch it happen. And more often than not, you don't see it, especially in some of these unique places where it's launching in the dark. Our good game wardens aren't out moving around yet. And so the reason this came into the bill was how it currently works nationwide in neighboring states and in the jurisdiction where I live, is often there is not an interaction. Often that person drives through the parking lot and you see a little sticker. Currently, at state parks and currently in our BLM, there's a little tiny sticker on your drift boat trailer. And so that's the concept is, okay, there's 10 that are commercial today, 2 that don't have that, so there's my number. So that I do see where you bring up an interesting point, and maybe there's an or that can come in there, but generally the vehicle's married to the trailer via a hitch and a lock. So the thought being is where this works and where this is done, trying to get a little bit out ahead of ourselves here, but both the boat and it is almost one, Senator Hicks. So the boat and the trailer are together in the morning before they go on the river, and then they obviously separate. But the concept being is that's a guide day or a guide launch, and that trailer and that vehicle also move during that day to the takeout location more often than not. So the concept being was we're just trying to cover base. If we just put in all the boats, and then our good game wardens drive through the parking lots, or these however we decide this shakes out, they might not know because none of those rigs, I mean, they're not going to see every boat on the river. Matter of fact, we rarely have interactions on the water. Generally, they're at the launch points or they're being recorded. Our fully regulated industry in Teton County is being recorded while we're on the water. So that the guy goes through and checks, okay, there's 7 of the green stickers. So that was Wyoming, bestguideservice.com and they were out there today. And so that was the concept behind needing that secondary, and it was debated heavily in interim, and people are like, we don't really, listen, stickers and outfitting and even private fishing are very common. AIS sticker, registration sticker for your boat, I mean, it's
So,
part of the
Mr.
game.
Chairman, and
Go
so
ahead,
I get all that, but you're requiring 2 fees. You're gonna pay a fee for your boat, the way this is structured, it's an annual fee for each commercially fishing guide boat, and is a conjunctive, means another fee. And so if we wanted to change that you had to have a sticker on all 3, I'm fine with that. But was it the intent that you're gonna have to pay twice, once for your trailer and pickup and once for?
Chairman and Senator, no, that is not the intent. The intent is one time. So I appreciate that and catch. I think that an amendment to strengthen that or clean that up, excuse me, would be appropriate. It is, the concept being it just one single fee, definitely not two.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So Senator Hicks, do you have an idea of?
I'll work
what we
on
do
it,
with
Mr.
vehicle or
Chairman.
Trailer?
Yep.
We could put a may up above. I think the idea was this shall be a registration for commercially guided fishing boats. I agree that we may not need trailer. I would think we'd have licensing on those trailers and vehicles already, but Senator Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Byron, I mean, I guess when I read it, I was just thinking, and when we worked in the interim, I was thinking that when you bought the sticker, it would just have two numbers, two stickers on one thing. They both have the same number. You put one on your boat, you put one on your trailer. And then that way, if they are checking to see you, they can see that boat goes with this trailer and kind of cleans that up. So I don't know if we maybe don't need vehicle. Is that what we don't need? Because it's the boat and the trailer that's the most important part of this, I think.
You know, you just unmuddied the water for me, Senator. That finally made sense.
Senator Jones.
That actually
and
makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones,
Chairman?
you nailed that one. And that is exactly the conversation that happened. And obviously this is a little bit, I feel like it's run off and the water is muddy right now. So very accurate. And the concept being when you get your stickers, it is two that both say WY1 on them. You stick one on your boat and one on either your vehicle or your trailer. And I think the department needs to have the leeway to decide that.
Okay.
You know, a lot of these trailers get backed into the water, stickers fall off, so a lot of folks have them on their rigs. So
That actually makes sense, and I think, I'm convinced that we'd probably be okay with the language, but Senator's working over there. I want to get on through the bill, committee, anything else? We can certainly catch this on the fly too, a little bit upstairs if we want to, if we think of something that we don't cover. Anything on page 4? Page 5, there's that November 1st. We want the department to visit with us, make some recommendations back to us. And I forget, Mr. Chairman, we've already set that third meeting, but is this November 1st date, is that going to be okay? And I'm looking at the director of the Game and Fish. November 1st is pretty quick on this bill, but I think the idea is to come together in the fall and say, you know, where are we at? What did we find out through another season? Where do we need to go with this thing? Anything else, committee? Anything else? All right, let's take roll, Sue, on House Bill 5.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 5 as amended. Senator Boner? Aye. Senator Hicks?
No.
Senator Jones?
Aye.
Senator Schuler?
Aye.
Chairman Landon?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 no.
Okay, we'll try to work on Senator Hicks and get him on board by this. So we'll take that up above and go to the Senate with it. Yeah, that's right.
Would you like me to present this one?
Yeah, we'll probably fix it. Mr. Chairman, thanks for all your work. Sorry that took a little bit this morning, but it's an important issue for us. Appreciate all your efforts. Have a good day over there in the other chamber. Thank you very much. And so we're gonna, we don't have a lot of time, Representative, but if you want to come on forward, we can at least get started on this bill. We may have to come back on Thursday if we don't get all the way through this. But you've waited patiently and we appreciate that. So Representative, take us away. We've got House Bill 211 engrossed. Hunting
Thank you, Ms.
wildlife from vehicles.
Yeah. it's-
Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Bill Allemand, House District 58. This is a really simple little bill. It's House Bill 211. And it was, a constituent asked me to carry this because he was being faced with this problem. And what the bill says is, it's really simple. No person shall harass, pursue, hunt, shoot, or kill any Wyoming wildlife that requires a license or permit to take, or is threatened or endangered by the federal wildlife regulations. You know, that sounds pretty simple. The language that we took out stated predators only, that you could shoot out of the window of a vehicle. Constituent that has had this problem was shooting prairie dogs out the window of his truck with permission on private ground, not on a roadway. Game warden came by and things went downhill. The problem with this bill is the fine. It's $10,000 and or a year in prison. Seems a little much to me. And that's pretty much all the bill says.
So regarding the fine then, Representative, this, I don't see anywhere where we have any repealers, or we don't take the fine out of this, right? I don't see where this bill
What we did take out,
addresses the fine.
what we did take out was wording. We changed the words to kill any Wyoming wildlife that requires a hunting license or permit or is federally protected. That's the way we repealed it, because before it did not say anything about having to have a license or permit.
Senator Boner.
Mr. Chairman, just making sure, so you can still kill predators from your vehicle if this bill passes, is that correct?
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Representative.
I did not hear that.
You can still shoot predators from your vehicle if this bill passes, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
You won't be able to shoot a bighorn sheep or an antelope or a deer, but prairie dogs, skunks, mice, things like that, you will be able to shoot.
So Representative, I'm trying to get my arms around the bill, and I'm sorry, I'm just riding a little slower horse this morning. So what drove this bill to us was somebody was on a road.
No, he was not on the road, sir.
Not on the road.
Not on the road.
thought
He was out in a pasture. The game warden spotted him out in a pasture with permission, shooting prairie dogs out of the back of his truck. The grass was high. He got up higher so that he could see him. And he was shooting out of the back of his truck on private property with permission, not on a road.
Okay. All right. Questions of the sponsor of the bill, Senator Hicks.
So without having walking all through the statutory scheme, the way I read this now is because currently you can get a handicap license and shoot out of your vehicle for licensed big game, and I don't see that exemption in here, and maybe have the department come up. But right now, they would not be able to do that the way I read the bill unless there's another provision, because we do issue permits for handicap to be able to shoot out of vehicles or licensed big game animals. And this says if you ever require to have a license, you're now going to be breaking the law under this if you have one of those handicap exceptions. And so, and maybe this is a question for the department, but I'm concerned about that aspect of the bill and would like to get your thoughts
Senator,
on
is
maybe
that-
including that.
Are you alluding to line 14 where the commission may exempt handicap hunters, et cetera? It is down at the bottom of page 2 there.
So the exemptions is in there.
It is
Yeah,
in
all
the-
right.
yeah, I think
I was
it
just
is
looking
in
at the
there.
new language, so
Yeah.
that addresses that.
So anything regarding the change in language at the top of page 2 or anything else for the sponsor? Okay, let's get the department up to help us better understand the bill. And Representative, stay close. We'll at least get the testimony on the bill, out of the way today, so. Chief, good morning. Good to see you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Dan Smith. I'm the Chief Game Warden for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. Hopefully I can answer some of the questions here. So what this bill does allow is that instead of just being able to harvest predatory animals out of a vehicle, it now would allow you to take any wildlife that does not require a license or a permit, is not already protected by statute, so protected animals and protected game or protected birds, including otters, just in case we want to go there, and is not federally protected.
Very funny.
Either threatened or endangered.
Do you know how many emails I got over the weekend, Chief?
Phone calls.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and we have a senator who laid that bill back, and yeah, we're about ready to charge the back of the room, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and so if it's not one of those things, then it'll be allowed to be taken from a vehicle. So examples of that would be prairie dogs, as a good representative mentioned, ground squirrels. It also would include crows or predatory animals or marmots. And I'll touch on another example here in just a moment. As already noted, this bill would not allow anybody to shoot from a public road or highway. And so there may be some confusion caused there where we make it legal to shoot out of your vehicle, but it's not legal to shoot from a road. In the circumstance that was described, when you're on private property, you're not parked on a road, this would make that legal to do that. Of course, there would be some potential safety concerns whenever you combine vehicles and firearms. Whether you're shooting out of them or transporting them, Wyoming is very gracious in how we transport firearms, and we don't regulate that, which is great. But almost every game warden could tell you of an instance, or you can talk to people who have bullet holes in their hoods or bullet holes in their tailgates where they've made a mistake while shooting from a vehicle. Those are very underreported. If nobody's injured and it's not in a situation where it requires law enforcement, most people don't want to report that, so you hear about it anecdotally or you see it. I think law enforcement uses a lot of discretion. Right now, our game wardens, I think in the example he presented, I don't think that person was actually issued a citation or a warning. We try to use some discretion there, but it would be illegal. If you take it to the full technicality of the law, somebody that runs over a deer with their vehicle would be in violation. We never write that ticket unless somebody's like chasing deer with their vehicle and trying to run them over. The one part of safety that does come to mind for me, or an example, is that under this bill, it would be legal now to shoot at Eurasian collared doves out of your vehicle. And so I think we'd want to have I think people would have to use a little discretion on if they're just going to drive around and shoot out their window at different wildlife. So other than that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
So, Chief, one of my concerns when I read the bill was just that it is, I think, going to bring a little bit of confusion back into things. As you mentioned, you still don't, this still would not allow for shooting off of a road, but it does say you shoot out of your vehicle. Any concerns about that? It just seems like we're probably going to have some confusion over that a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. It is legal already to hunt predators out of your vehicle, and so they can't shoot from a road. So that currently does exist. As the good Senator Hicks said, we do authorize disabled hunters to hunt from a vehicle, but we define in commission regulation that has to be a stationary vehicle and it does have to be off of a road. So there may be some confusion in just learning what can and can't be done under this bill. There may also be some confusion on what requires a permit and what doesn't. If taking it to the extreme, if I want to shoot a bat out the window, do I know whether a bat requires a permit or not? Most people don't. Right now, under the law, they know what a predatory animal is. We've had that in statute for a long time. So there will be a learning curve here for folks to figure out what they can and can't shoot out of a vehicle.
Any other questions of the chief? And Chief, thank you. Appreciate it. We're going to run out of time, Representative. And so if we come back on Thursday and anyone would like to testify, or if you'd like to visit with us briefly again on Thursday morning, we'll knock that one out first. But we're just flat out of time. We've got 5 minutes to get upstairs, and at least we heard the bill, and we'll take it up again on Thursday morning. Okay, thank you, Representative and Department. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see everybody on Thursday morning. We're adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering, given the predisposition of this committee, maybe we should run a repealer back here on WS 23-1101A subsection 9. That's protected. Oh, God, we're gonna get that repealer yet.
You're on it, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, it looked familiar, so I went,